Trevor was back there like, this ain't on me. No, it's on me. It's on me. But you know what my excuse can be right now? Dad brain. That's right. So I want to start off this morning, first off, issuing an apology on behalf of our lead pastor. So last week, he stood up and he says, well, John called me and asked if this thing came with a manual. Okay. All right. In what world would Eric Most be my first call with a newborn manual? There's no way. And so for all of the moms in here, you are all on the list way ahead of Eric. If I need help with cows, sure, I'll call Eric. But no, So and also, if there was a manual, I wouldn't read it. YouTube, that's my generation. Like, that's what I'm going to do. That's the way that it works, okay? But my goodness, I just felt like that needed to be addressed. I didn't want anybody in here to be offended or mad at me that I did not reach out to you about newborn care. So I'm not reaching out to Eric. I hope he's watching. Just saying. All right, well, last week we started our series, Common Phrases That People Believe to Be True. And Barry, he spoke on the phrase, God helps those who help themselves. And it was a really, really good, it was a really convicting message, actually. And so if you missed it, consider going onto our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and hey, my generation, YouTube, there you go. Yeah, go on there and give that a listen so that way you can kind of be caught up with where we're at today. But this morning, we're going to be looking at a phrase that sounds really, really good, that looks really, really good, and it tastes good on the tongue and to the ears, but is it really good? Have you ever had maybe a friend or a family member or a close relative, whatever it is, maybe go through a hard time and you just didn't really know what to say to them? Or maybe you were the one going through the difficult time and someone didn't know what to say, and so they come up to you, and with the best intent, with the greatest heart, they say, God won't give you more than you can handle. Whoever said that clearly never had a newborn. Just saying. But I mean, think about it. It sounds super comforting, doesn't it? It shares that you believe they're strong enough to get through what it is they're facing. I mean, it helps people maybe see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? You're strong, you're tough, you can get through this. There's nothing that's going to stop you. And there's nothing wrong with giving that type of encouragement to people. It even sounds biblical. I mean, look, God won't give you more than you can handle. It sounds great. We have a God who loves us, who cares for us. Why would he give us more than we're able to handle? It makes sense, or some sort of sense in our minds, but is that phrase really true? Will God really not give you more than you can handle? And so, being the person that I am, I wanted to look at Bible stories to see if this was true. Like we should do with everything. Whenever you hear something, take it back to God's word and test it against God's word to make sure that it's truth. And so I looked at a pretty well-known story of Daniel in the lion's den. And let me give you just a little background in case you haven't heard this story before. Daniel, he was from Jerusalem, and then Babylon invaded Jerusalem, and they captured the best and the brightest of Jerusalem's men that they had. And so they took the best, the smartest guys, and they raised them up in the ways of the Babylonians. And at the end of that training, Daniel was one of the best, was one of the wisest. And so he actually entered into the service of the king of Babylon. And he, along with 3 others, they continued their way kind of up through the ranks as they continued to seek God, even though they had to serve a different king, someone who thought they were God. And Daniel, he actually got to interpret dreams and visions for the king, and so much so that he was promoted to the 3rd highest position in the Babylon kingdom. And then after the king was slain in battle, Darius became the king of Babylon, and Darius promoted Daniel to 2nd in command. And they had such a good relationship that Darius was even contemplating making Daniel head over the entire Babylonian kingdom. Now remember, he's not originally from Babylon. He's originally from Jerusalem. And so when Darius was kind of contemplating this, it made all of the other Babylonians who were like in his court kind of angry. Because they're like, he's not even from here. Why should he, be promoted up there? Why should he do that? And so they kind of cooked up a scheme where they talked to King Darius and they said, hey, how about, you sign a law that says anyone who prays to a god other than you, because you're King Darius, you are the god. So anyone who prays to a god other than King Darius should be thrown into the den of lions. And Darius is like, you know what? That sounds really good. He's like, that makes sense. They should all bow down and worship me and pray to me. And you know what I just realized? That didn't even faze me. I'm so used to it now. That's crazy. Yes, I have made it. Okay, I'm sorry. That totally was just like, wow, I'm doing this. Okay, anyways. So sorry. You guys have to cope with my ADD, sleep-deprived mind right now, okay? Deprived isn't even a word. What the world? Oh, my goodness. I know it's not deprived, whatever. Okay, so anyways, they convinced King Darius to write this law. And it says, if anyone prays to a god other than King Darius himself, he'll be thrown into a den of lions. And so that gets us up to the part where I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to read this story from the perspective of God won't give you more than you can handle. All right, so it says, King Darius signed a law that stated if anyone prays to anyone or anything other than King Darius himself, he shall be thrown into the den of lions. And when Daniel heard of the law, he went into his room, knelt down, and began praying to God. The king's high officials saw this, and they went straight to King Darius, and they reminded him of the law that he had just signed. And they then told Darius that Daniel was ignoring the law and praying to his God. So the king then gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. And the king said to Daniel as he was cast into the den of lions, "Don't worry, God won't give you more than you can handle." And a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. But before the stone could even be sealed, Daniel was eaten by the lions, and they rested well that night with a full belly. The end. See, obviously, yay. Who said yay? Wow. See, obviously, that was a situation that Daniel could not handle on his own. If there was one lion in that den, he has like a 0.0001% chance of survival. But a den full of lions, no way. There's absolutely no way. I don't care how skilled a fighter he is or how good he is, he ain't gonna handle that on his own. And just so you know, because there's some here like, wow, that's actually in there. That's not how the story actually goes. Daniel was thrown into the den. The king went to check on him the next day, and Daniel told Darius that God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. And it even says in 6:23, not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. See, there are so many more stories like this that show that sometimes people handle things or they go through things that they can't handle. Like, think about Jonah in the whale. I mean, if he had the thought of, God won't give me more than he can handle, he'd just be sitting there in the belly like, well, do I go out that way? Do I go out that way? Do I go out that way? Like what am I going to do? Or think David and Goliath. I mean, with what David faced, there's no way he could have handled that. Peter walking on water. I mean, we literally saw what he was able to handle, and he started sinking the second he took his eyes off of Christ. See, there are so many stories from the Bible that show that people, Jesus followers, experienced things that were more than they were able to handle apart from divine intervention. So just from looking at some stories from the Bible, we can see that this phrase is flawed, at least. It's at least flawed. And so we're going to take a look at where this phrase actually came from. And the crazy thing is, it came from a Bible verse. It actually came from a Bible verse, and people kind of sort of twisted it or maybe just didn't really understand it to get what they want out of it. So it says in 1 Corinthians 10:13, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted more than you can handle. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. And on the surface, if you're just kind of skimming through and you read that, I can see where the mix-up comes from. It's right here where it says, he will not let you be tempted more than you can handle, which easily changes into, he will not give you more than you can handle. It's just like one or two words that just really quickly changes. But man, is there a massive difference between temptation and the way that that phrase, God won't give you more than you can handle, is commonly used. Which, whenever we hear that phrase, it's usually when someone's going through hardship or going through a hard time. See, temptation is a situation where you struggle to decide whether to do what God says or not. We have the ability to choose whichever way we want, and sometimes we're pulled towards making the decision that goes against God. And the verse says, we won't be tempted beyond what we can bear or what we have the ability to say no to. So maybe parents out there who took your kids out for Halloween. Do we have some of that? Some of that. Wow. Do we have some of those? Some of y'all's. I don't know what to say. My goodness. But I bet you experienced the temptation to eat some of your child's candy after you took them out. I mean, you probably even justified it. You probably said, it's a dad tax, Or like, my child was crying on the sidewalk, so I went up to the door and rang the doorbell. I'm the one who said trick or treat, and I'm the one who got the candy. It's my candy. Like, you probably tried to justify it. And then I bet in the morning afterwards, you were tempted to lie to them saying, well, I don't know what happened to the king-size Reese's. Like, I guarantee that. Maybe it's like we have some juicy gossip or something, and you're tempted to kind of tell everyone at work all about it. You're like, well, you'll want to hear this. Trust me, you really do want to hear. I'm not really sure if I should tell you. Like, I just don't know. Or maybe it's like when the attractive man or woman walks by, and you're just kind of tempted to, like, take a second look and, like, linger a little bit. See, those are temptations. Things that we have the control to say yes or no to. But when I hear the phrase, God won't give you more than you can handle, what I picture is God up in heaven going like, okay, him, like, he's pretty good, so he can handle some bankruptcy, maybe like a totaled car or two, and probably the death of a distant relative. Like, he's pretty good. Now, she's like, she's like an angel, and like she's strong. She can handle her husband having an affair, 2 lost jobs, raising 3 kids on her own, and how about a house fire? I mean, that sounds good. Like, I think she can handle that. Like, is that not what you think when you hear that? When we say God is giving us only what we can handle, it means that God is the one who's putting troubling circumstances in our path. The hardships in life are the result of living in a fallen and sinful world, or the result of a decision that was made, but usually God is the one who gets blamed for it. When we go through these things, it's like, God, why did you let this happen to me? God, how could you let this happen to me? I mean, they hate you over there. Why not let it happen to them? Why me? See, our circumstances and the difficult things that we go through and experience aren't because God thinks we can handle them, so he gives them to us to go through them. See, it says in Romans 5:12, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. See, sin entered the world, and once that happened, it poisoned everything in existence, and it took it from perfect to imperfect. And now everything that bad that happens is a consequence of living in a broken and sinful world. See, what God does allow us to go through that is not more than we can handle is temptation, something that we have the choice over, not our circumstances. See, there are many things in this life that we experience that are just incredibly difficult, like the death of a loved one. Maybe losing a job, especially around the holidays. Being cheated on, finding out your spouse is having an affair. Being sat down and told that your parents are getting divorced. And I know there's some of you thinking like, I experienced some of that. I walked through some of that. And yeah, it was hard, but I still made it through. Like I was able to handle it. I was able to get through it. And yes, absolutely, we can go through things like that on our own. We can. And that's where this phrase, God won't give you more than you can handle, is kind of partially true. We are able to go through very difficult things. We can get through things like that on our own. But we have a choice to determine how we're going to come out on the other side. Let me share this quick story to kind of illustrate what I'm getting at here. Last Sunday morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting in our nursery holding my little baby, Harper. And some of you are like, man, I thought we were going to get through one sermon without a baby story. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It would not happen. But we had fed her. She woke us up at about 4:15, and we had fed her. And Sharia, because I'm the loving husband, I am the burper. I am the burp king. And so Sharia feeds her and then hands her to me, and I'm so good at it. Sometimes I just look at her, and it's just like, bleh. I'm like, yes, score. Like, I'm just that good. And Sharia, she went back to sleep, and I'm just holding her, rocking in our rocking recliner, just slowly rocking, and I'm just looking down at her, just admiring her beautiful face, admiring her nose, her little ears. You shut your mouth. just admiring my little baby without a single care in the world. And as I'm watching her sleep in my arms, I'm falling more and more in love with my baby girl. And then out of nowhere, a giant glob of body temperature, milk-colored sticky stuff comes flying out of her mouth at 100 miles an hour and hits my chest and my beard. No, it was bad. My beard. And as I'm sitting there in shock, she immediately starts crying. Well, it takes me a couple seconds to realize what in the world just happened. Like, I started reaching for the burp rag to kind of clean us both up, and then I realized, oh, the burp rag is covered in the same sticky substance. This isn't going to do any good. Like, I frantically look around while Harper is exercising her lungs. Like, she's going to be an amazing singer, by the way. Like, the way that she screams, holy cats, it's going to be awesome. But, like, I even tried wiping my chest off with my beard. That's how desperate I was. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm sitting there 5 o'clock in the morning, having had very little sleep. I'm holding a bawling infant, and she and I are both covered in spit up. And I did the only thing that I could possibly do in that moment. Sharia, can you come help me, please? I called out to my wife, the only one who was able to help me in that situation, the only one who was able to come alongside me in my distress and trauma. I have no idea what to do, and she was the only one who was able to come alongside me. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. He could have handled that on his own. Okay, look, I am not built to handle that. Okay, I can handle 7th grade boys. Like, I can do that. But baby spit up, like, and not just baby spit up. Have you ever smelled formula spit up? Oh, what about it mixed with a beard? Okay, now what about not only with it mixed with a beard, what about with a beard who hasn't showered in 3 days because he hasn't had time to because there's a bawling infant? Okay, and then what about while the infant is screaming in your ear? Okay, what would have happened had I tried to go through that on my own is I would have literally become crusty and sour smelling, and my beard probably would have grown a fungus of some sort, which means I would have had to shave it off, and then I would have looked like a 5-year-old, and people would have mistaken me for Harper's brother than her 30-year-old father, okay? I'm not doing that. The fact is, had I tried to deal with that situation on my own, I literally would have become bitter. But instead, I reached out and I relied on the only one who was able to help me in that situation. And she kind of lovingly came alongside of me, well, as lovingly as she can be, being sleep deprived and with it being 5 in the morning. she comes alongside and kind of like shows me maybe a different way to hold her and kind of tilt her head up in a different direction and like how to maybe clean something up using the pile of rags that I did not see in my distress that were right there, but somehow I missed them. But because, mom eyes, thank you, that's what it is. But because I reached out to her, I became a better person. And see, some of you are sitting here like, what does this have to do with anything that we are talking about? And here's the point that I'm wanting to make. Had I tried to go through that on my own, I would have become bitter. Not literally, like I'm not going to hold a grudge against my daughter until I die because she spit up on me when she was 2 weeks old. Not going to do that. She spit up on me last night, and it was like, oh, I still love you. Like, it was good. I'm not going to hold that grudge. But I mean, literally, I would have been like crusty and smelled bitter and just like bad. But instead, because I reached out to someone to walk with me through it, I came out better. See, we can go through the circumstances in life on our own. We'll be able to go through them and walk through many of them. But what happens to you on the inside when you try and just power through and do it on your own? Where you're going through a really difficult time and you're looking at maybe your coworkers' lives or the rest of your family and you're just like, well, why aren't they going through this with me? Like, they have no idea what it is I'm feeling on the inside. Like, this is like, they don't know what it's like to be going through this. You're wishing that your life was like theirs, or even worse, that they were going through the same circumstance and things that you were going through, and you just become bitter. And the question is, when you go through hardship, are you going to choose to become bitter, or are you going to choose to become better? See, the story of Job comes to mind. And Job, he was a man who walked with integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. And that's how he was actually described in Job chapter 1. And Job, he was thriving. He had tons of livestock. He had tons of land, a big family. He had servants. He was like the ultimate picture of success. And he would seek after God in everything that he did. The Bible even talks about how he would make sacrifices on his children's behalf at the end of every day, just in case one of them had sinned. Like, that's where his heart was to not only care for himself and his relationship with God, but to care for his children and their relationship with God. And you can read more about Job. I would definitely encourage you to do that. It's in the book of Job in the Bible. But there came a time where God allowed Job to go through many trials as Satan was trying to test his dedication to God. And what happened to Job in those trials is he lost his land. He lost his livestock. He lost his loved ones. He was covered head to toe in boils. His life was literally devastated. And all but his wife and his life was taken from him. And while sitting in mourning, he had 3 men come to him to try and comfort him. And they sat in silence for 7 days because they saw the mourning that he was going through, and it was just too great for any words to even be spoken. So they sat in silence for 7 days, and then at the end of those 7 days, Job began crying out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to summarize. The book of Job is actually, these are called Job's speeches. Okay, and so I want to encourage you to go to the book of Job and read through his speeches. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize these. And as I read through these, see if you can relate or have been able to relate to maybe any of these feelings that Job is crying out here. Where he says, God, why did you let me live? God, I wish I had never been born. I want to die. God, please kill me and end my life. God, why did you do this to me? Why would God allow this to happen to me? Where is God in all of this? God, I thought that you loved me. How could you do this to me? Why didn't God let this happen to evil people? I loved him. Like, I gave my life to him. God, why? He gets to the point in his last speech where he literally says, I don't care anymore, God, just end my life. And I'd be willing to bet that there's some of you who have said some of those same things before when going through hardship. I mean, just a few weeks ago, Sharaya and I went through the heartbreaking situation of bringing a baby home from the hospital. Just 3 days later, place her back into her birth mom's arms. And then we had to wait a week where we didn't know what was going to happen. And we said these things. We felt these things. There was literally times on numerous occasions where we both would just hug each other and just say, I don't know how I can go on without her. That's what we were feeling. And maybe for you, it's in the death of a loved one you felt that. Maybe when you can't afford to pay your bills, you can't pay for your food, you're struggling to make it paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you've been let go from your job. Maybe you've been kicked out of your house and you and your family are now trying to live on the streets. Maybe you just found out that a loved one passed away. Maybe there's someone in your life that just like cheated on you or is having an affair. Maybe you're unable to conceive a child. Maybe your parents are getting divorced. You feel like God and everyone has abandoned you and your life is in ruin. See, we feel these things. We say these things. And here is where the choice comes in for all of us. Do we allow ourselves to go through these trials and become bitter with God? Or do we allow ourselves to go through it and become a better person? See, it's really, really easy to become bitter when we just kind of sit and stew in our anger, when we compare our situations to someone else's, when we blame God for everything, when we turn our back on him until he makes it right with us, when we hold our anger inside until it consumes us. Eric always says the phrase, anger leaks, and that is 100% true. The longer we hold it in, the more it's going to leak out and affect not only us, but those that we love that are around us. But we can go through these circumstances and become a better person when we choose to rely on God and not go through it alone. When we surround ourselves with others, even if they just sit with us. When we deal with our anger and with our grief in a healthy way. When we don't pull away and we allow God to use other people to come around us and comfort us, even when we want nothing more than to just be alone. When we realize that even through our suffering, even through our pain, God is shedding his grace on us with each and every breath that we take. See, in the end, after all of his suffering, after all of his speeches, after all of his crying out, Job ended up acknowledging God, acknowledging his wisdom, acknowledging his power and his love, and God chose to bless him. And yes, Job, he received physical blessings. Everything that he had that was taken away from him was restored and multiplied. But he also received the blessing of coming out the other side of it a better person. Coming out of a time like that where he now loved God and trusted him more, even though his life had been completely destroyed. See, had he remained bitter and lived the life that he was declaring, he would have been depressed. He would have driven everyone away with his suppressed anger. He would have pushed God out, and he would have died of old age alone and feeling nothing but anger. See, he went through that, and he was a changed man. There's no way that you can go through anything like that and not be changed. But here's kind of the grind for us, and this is a choice. We have a choice when we walk through the hardships of life. We need to choose when we go through that, are we going to become bitter or are we going to become better? And here's what I mean by that. Every single person, whether you're a Jesus follower or not, it doesn't matter. Every single person surrenders to something. Everyone seeks something to help them through difficult times. You may not think that you do, or you may not see it as that, but everyone surrenders to something. When life is hard, when you're going through difficult trials and circumstances, where do you turn? Maybe for you, it's alcohol. You're just going to drink the pain away. Maybe for you, it's drugs. Maybe for you, it's pornography. You want something just to help you feel better, just for a little bit. Maybe for you, it's food. That's where you turn to. Maybe for you, it's sex. Whatever it is, we all surrender to something to try and get through difficult circumstances. Think about what it is for you in your head right now. But all of those things, if we surrender to them, they're going to lead us to become bitter. We're saying, you know what, I'm just going to be a man and I'm going to power my way through this. I'm not going to acknowledge my feelings because I'm a man. I don't have any feelings. I'm just going to power my way through this. I'm going to ignore the feelings of others, not deal with my own emotions, and just do what it takes to get to the other side. And you know what? If you have that mindset, it leads to bitterness. If the phrase, God won't give you more than you can handle, were completely true in the way that it's used today, there wouldn't be a purpose for God. If we could handle it all, we wouldn't need God. Which, yes, if we want to go through things and become bitter, then by all means, go through it without God. But when we face circumstances in our life with God, we become better. It's turning to Him, relying on Him, clinging to Him. And maybe there's some of you here today who you're bitter right now. You're going through a time, or you have gone through a time that you're wrestling with God, or maybe you're still wrestling with Him. And the wrestling is okay. The anger is okay. The fear is okay. The hopelessness is okay to feel that. Becoming better doesn't mean that the hurt never happened and the pain goes away. But are you going to continue to try and agonize or just power your way through it on your own? Are you going to just try and power your way through it, or are you going to surrender to God? See, like I said, the pain won't go away. You're not forgetting the hurt or the loss. All that turning to God is in this is you're just choosing to embrace God rather than blame God. Maybe there's some of you here today who are struggling for words to know what to say to somebody else who's going through a hard time. And I would challenge you to maybe not say words at first, but just be there. Just be present. And walk alongside them through their hurt, through their pain, through their suffering, through their hardship. Walk alongside with them and remind them that God won't give you more than you can handle with Him. See, that's where this phrase becomes true. With Him. With Him, there's not a hardship we can't face. With Him, there's not a circumstance in our life that we can't face. With Him, there's not a death of a loved one that we can't face and go through. With Him, there's not a lost job, there's not divorce, there's not adultery, there's not anything in this world that we cannot go through without God. With God, we can go through these things. So Crossing, whether you're in that circumstance where you're the one who's hurting, whether you're in that circumstance where you're the one who's trying to comfort someone else who's hurting, let's be that church that goes through this life, the good times, the bad times, but we choose to go through it all with God, not blaming God. Let's pray. God, we just thank you so much that you love us. And man, there's so many times, God, where we blame you for the stuff that we go through. We blame you for the trials in our life, for the hard things, because sometimes we just think, God, if I love you, life should be easy. But God, you love us through that. You love us through the wrestling in our hearts and the wrestling in our mind, and you still pour out your love and your grace on us, God. And we thank you so much for that you do not turn your back on us, even when we sometimes turn our back on you. God, help us as individuals, help us as a church to truly live our lives trusting in you, clinging to you, and not blaming you for the things that we go through and the things that we face, God. God, I just think of the Jurgens family right now and the Mann family. There are many others that they've gone through significant loss. God, I pray that you would help us as a church to know how to come alongside them, to encourage them, to be with them, to remind them that you are with them, God. Help us to love them well. Help us to love everyone in our lives well, God, to represent you to every single person we come in contact with. God, we just thank you again for this time and this day. And we pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.